Right, so I've talked about before how power in martial arts is very much generating momentum and transferring it quickly. This kind of gets distorted along the way where people start looking at quick spasms as the way of generating power. And so you get something where someone stands like this with their hands down, they go like that and say that they can hit hard and fast pretty much. But that in and of itself is a quick spasm. It's more similar to saying that it was a bunch of simultaneous unrelated movements that kind of contributed into looking like it did something, but it didn't. In the end, that's probably like 5% harder than an arm only punch, and the arm only punch would be a lot weaker than it could have been. So, really, it's weaker than if you were to just throw a decent arm only punch, doing that full body kind of random spasm. Where what they're probably trying to mimic is something that looks more like that, where it looks like a quick spasm potentially, but what it ends up being is a swing, pretty much. You swing the body, you swing the weight, and you generate momentum through that swinging mechanic. And what ends up happening is you create a very smooth motion. And that's really the thing that I want to get across here is that you want the power generation itself to be smooth, not sporadic or anything like that. It shouldn't just be like dun 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 dun. It should feel like it's just trailing through you kind of thing. So thinking about it this way, imagine a baseball player swinging a bat. Imagine if they're about to hit the ball and they go like that. Ball's not going anywhere. The ball might knock the bat out of the batter's hand, if anything, at that point. Instead, they do a very smooth swing all the way through. Your power generation isn't much different. Now, when you're looking at it and you start thinking about use of the pelvis, and well, that's the main thing that people ever talk about, use of the pelvis, pivoting the feet. Now, it's going to be more than that. So when you start off learning power generation, it's first becoming familiar with the body. If you don't know it, you can't use it. And so I've ran into people who don't know how to activate certain muscle groups at all. They just don't know how. So like they won't be able to activate the muscles of the back or the chest or just something like that, where it will severely inhibit their power in some direction or in some way, right? So you need to build body awareness. So you need to build the awareness of the pelvis and how to rotate it. You need to build awareness of something like the legs, where the foot can pivot, because if you don't, then you're going to mess up your knee, right? Random alerts. So after building the awareness, it flips. And I call this kind of like the breaking free point. What I mean by that is you stop focusing on, say, like using your pelvis or whatever to kind of drive the punch through. Instead, you just focus on I need to swing. And where that kind of breaks you free is you no longer rely on very ideal positioning to be able to pull off certain movements. And so you can be kind of like leaning back and on the side, and here your hips are kind of locked in this awkward position as you're probably leaning back. And if you try to use your hip, it's going to be very limited in how much power you can get. But because you have more of your body to use than just your hip and any motion, you can still try to get power by, again, you're trying to create the momentum. And so what's going to happen is your hip will do less motion, but your shoulder rotation will end up contributing more to try to compensate. And it's not going to be a conscious decision. It's just your own body awareness and desire to create power is going to result in that. Now, when it comes to the rotation of the pelvis, it's not so much the power generator so much as it is a sign of power. And the reason why I say that is because what's really causing the pelvis rotation is the legs. And so if you aren't engaging the legs properly in the strike, your pelvis isn't going to rotate. Even as you walk, just a typical walk, I'm going to lock my upper body. Your hips should rotate a little bit, because that's pretty much how the legs feed energy up into the pelvis. It's through rotation, right? What's going to happen as you walk? Your body's going to counter torque at the midsection, which is going to cause the arm swing, right? And so you're kind of taking advantage of some of these same principles to create momentum. You're using the legs to turn the pelvis, but your focus isn't on the pelvis. If you focus too heavily on the pelvis, you focus less on the other portions of the body. If you're going to isolate and use anything, the pelvis is the ideal one to focus heavily on, but it should not be the only thing you focus on if you have the capacity to kind of spread further and focus more on just in general building momentum. Because when you build that momentum, it's going to start in the legs and up through the pelvis, but then from there it has to go across your core, the midsection of the body, the chest and back and shoulders, right? And then the limb itself. And they're all going to contribute into a swing. And the thing to remember about a swing is that it's not throw and forget. And that's why I keep saying swing and not throw. Because if you throw and forget, you'll just kind of go like that. You'll get a quick movement out that will have some power to it, but it's not going to have full power. Again, take the same idea. Imagine if you threw the bat at the ball. You're going to have, again, a similar problem as to when you just kind of muscle spasm to it. This is where you start losing the structure and the integrity of your own posture into the strike, which is also going to help you contribute your power into the motion. It doesn't matter what kind of strike you're doing. It's going to be important to maximizing the power of it. Now, I talked about how it's going to start at the pelvis typically, and even if the pelvis is locked, like your shoulder rotation is going to be able to help you make up for lack of pelvis rotation, right? As long as you're not solely focused on the pelvis. Same thing. Now, you shouldn't have this problem so much, but if you were to only use your arm, you can still get a decent amount of power out of your arm-only strikes if you swing it. But if you throw and forget, you're going to have absolutely no power. Now, the further you go down in this chain, the more power you're going to have, the more muscles you have contributing, the more mass you have in motion. And so if I throw only my arm, that is the weakest I can do. But if you swing it properly, it will still cause damage. If I incorporate the rotation of the shoulders, more power. If I start using the pelvis and waist area, more power. If I start stepping into it, I'm going to start getting more and more power with each thing I add. All right, that's all.